Take two. Okay, hi. Welcome to my brand new booktube channel. I have a bookstagram account called Books and Caffeine. I asked you guys to vote on what my first video should be, and this is what we came upon. This is going to be every book that I've given 5 stars this year. Honestly, my major stipulation for giving a book 5 stars is the way it makes me feel. Really what pushes a book from 4.5 to 5 stars for me is like the physical emotions that I feel. Each and every one of these books gave me just like a visceral reaction to something. Sadness or grief or heartbreak or happiness and butterflies and romance and yada yada. Let's go ahead and get into it because there's a lot here. Starting off, we have A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson. I cannot speak highly enough about this book. This book is about a girl named Pip, or Pippa, Pip for short, who is investigating a murder that took place in her hometown for her senior project. She ends up, figuring out who did it, but she also kind of puts herself in danger. This is a 3-book series. Actually, I think the author is coming out with a prequel soon, so that's cool. But like I said, I cannot recommend this series highly enough to literally anyone. Anyone would enjoy this, especially if you are a true crime girly. It kind of feels like a true crime podcast, but it is just very, very immersive, and the story is very fast-paced. And the friendship and the banter between the characters is amazing. Her friend Ravi, who's also in all 3 books of the series, is just perfect, can do no wrong. I actually gave the first 2 books in the series 5 stars, which never happens. I rarely ever give 2 books in a series 5 stars, but these were just so... I don't even have enough words to describe how much I love these books. Next we have Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Every single TJR book I have read, which have all been this year, have been 5 stars. This is about the Riva family. It takes place over the course of 24 hours, and it follows all of the Riva siblings, and it also is dual timelines, so it goes back and talks about their parents' story. The dad in this book is Mick Riva, who, if you've read 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, you know that he is one of the husbands. So it is intertwined. It takes place in the 1980s, I think 1980 something. It basically is about this party that the Riva siblings have every summer, and it follows just the whole course of the day. It kind of tells you in the beginning, but basically, you start the day, you end the day, and by the end of the day, the house is up in flames, literally. So it is just a heart-wrenching story, especially if you are an oldest daughter. The character of Nina Riva, who is the oldest girl, she just has so many big sister feelings. Like I said, 5-star books just make me feel a lot of emotions, and this made me feel literally all of them. Next was a more recent read, and I am literally obsessed with it. I can't stop thinking about it. It is Book Lovers by Emily Henry. As you can see by the amount of tabs I have, I'm absolutely obsessed with this book and with the 2 main characters. I read all of her rom-coms, her big 3. Please ignore the nail that just popped off when I was in the car. But I think this is her best one yet. Nora Stevens, she's our main character, and she's a literary agent from New York. She's cutthroat. She is such a girl boss, like in every sense of the word. Her love interest is Charlie Lastra, who is an editor, and they're sort of like rivals, so it's kind of like a rivals to lovers type situation. I've seen people complain about how there's not enough romance in this, which I disagree, like, highly, but it really isn't all about the romance. It focuses a lot on Nora's journey and then also her relationship with her sister. So it is another one of those big sister books that if you are an oldest sister, you are going to relate to heavily. But honestly, even if you're not an oldest sister, you should read this because it is so fun. The banter is so good. Charlie Lastra has my heart, especially if you like small town romances. This is a really good one. There's a bookshop, which is like, it's like a bookshop makeover. Like what more could you want out of a book, honestly? It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. So this is the story of Lily Bloom. You know, I'll just go ahead and say it because you probably know already anyway, but she grew up in an abusive household. This jumps back and forth between her life now and then letters she wrote, which are really just journals that she wrote whenever she was growing up. She talks about a childhood friend. And then she also gets into a relationship with this new guy who seems really great, but then we find out he maybe isn't everything that she hoped he would be. I've never been the victim of domestic physical abuse or any kind of abuse like that, which I am absurdly grateful for. It helps you understand the mindset of someone who is in that situation, and that is why I think everybody should read this book at least once in their life. The last line in this book, you know what I'm talking about. That last line, I think about that shit every day. If you read this, you really need to go into it pretty much blind, except for the content warning, which is it deals heavily with domestic abuse. From Lukov, with love. Why did I say it like that? This book made me love slow burns. Of course, it started off pretty slow, which it's a slow burn, so obviously, duh. But by the time you get to the end, when the slow burn finally, you know, burns, you look back and you realize like the buildup is so good. Let's talk about what it's about. So it's about this girl named Jasmine Santos. She is a professional figure skater. She partners with this guy named Ivan Lukov, but the thing is, she fucking hates his guts. So this is an enemies to lovers slow burn with figure skaters, which I really liked. I've never read like a figure skating romance before. The caretaking while sick scene in this book is top tier. If you like slow burns, read this. If you're not sure if you like slow burns, read this. If you think you detest slow burns, try if you haven't, because I love this and I thought I didn't like slow burns, but it turns out I do. So yeah, sippy break, hold on. Okay, next up is another coho. It is Ugly Love. This is about Tate and Miles. It is dual timeline, so the present day scenes are from Tate's perspective and the past scenes are from Miles's perspective. Miles is Tate's brother's best friend and neighbor. Tate and Miles are attracted to each other, so they end up starting a friends with benefits type situation, no strings attached. We all know how well that works out in romance books. They end up developing more feelings for each other, naturally, but there is just some reason that Miles won't name that he just cannot date. He cannot start a relationship with Tate even though he wants to. He will not fall in love. And we're like, dude, what's the big deal? And then we find out why, which is what the past chapters are kind of leading us up to. Crazy traumatic shit happened. I get it, y'all. He does need to be in therapy. He says some really, if you know, you know, he says some really awful things in this book, but I genuinely think that he is a good guy and he deserves a chance. He deserves that love in his life. I will not stand for Miles slander. I think he's trying to figure it out. Okay? Okay. You just saw it. You know what this is. A Court of Mist and Fury. Y'all. A moment of silence. For me, from my heart while reading this book. So I read this for the first time last year. But this is one of my favorite books of all time. The first book can go fuck itself, honestly. No hate, no hate. It was really hateful. The second book is amazing. A Court of Thorns and Roses is about a human girl named Farah who ends up killing a fairy accidentally and she's taken into the fairy world, which she as a human has been raised to despise and be afraid of, and she's taken to this estate where this high fae named Tamlin takes her into his home and kind of gives her everything that she's never had because she's like poor and shit. There is a curse on the land that is draining the magic and it is sending these horrible creatures into the fairy lands, and Feyre is the key to stopping it. Whoa. So this is the second book in the series, and I'm not going to talk about the plot at all, because if you haven't read it, you have to go to it blind. This book is one of my comfort reads. Literally just this morning I was flipping through it and I got to chapter 54, and I was just like kind of skimming through some of them, and I had to take a minute and like sit down and breathe, because every time I think about our main couple's journey to finding each other, I forget how to breathe. The love interest in this series is like my favorite love interest of all time, essentially. He's another man I will not stand for slander of him, okay? He's amazing. I love him. Okay? Consider that first. And this book especially just made me fall in love with reading all over again. If you want to get into fantasy, this is a good one. It's more character focused and focused on the main couple's romance. I don't have enough good words to say about this book. This is my favorite book that I've read this year. It is The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna. So this is about two sisters during World War II who are living in occupied France. And it is essentially about how they survive the war. When we think of World War II, you know, there's men fighting in the trenches, but the women at home are also fighting in their own way. So this is about two sisters living in France, and each of their contributions to the war effort and the resistance in France. If you like historical fiction, you've got to read this. One of the main characters, one of the sisters, Isabel, she is one of my favorite female characters of all time. Her bravery and her boldness and her loyalty and just everything about her is just so incredible. I would say above all, this is a story about love. Not even the romantic kind. It is about how love gets us through the absolute worst of humanity. If I could recommend one book for the rest of my life, it would probably be this one. So pick this up if it sounds even the least bit interesting to you, or if not, I don't care. It's so good. Sorry that the lighting is kind of meh because the sun is setting. So another 5-star this year was It Happened One Summer. It is about Piper, who is a basically like an influencer, and she gets into some trouble, so her stepdad sends her to this little town in Washington. Her dad passed away, but he owned a bar there, and so he sends her and her sister there to run it for I think a few months to kind of learn some responsibility. She meets Brendan, and bada bing bada boom, they're fucking on a boat. This is by Tessa Bailey, and if you don't know, Tessa Bailey is a romance writer. She writes just like the best spice. It's spicy while also being like loving and romantic. I worship at the altar of Tessa Bailey Dirty Talk. I think it was Entertainment Weekly that called her the Michelangelo of Dirty Talk. If that says anything about this, I'm not lying. It's really good. So this is a small town, sort of forced proximity, Grumpy Sunshine type beat. It's the Folk of the Air series. Now this is the third book. It's the only book that I gave 5 stars out of the whole series. This is just the one that kind of made me feel the most, really like evoked the most emotions in me. It's the last one in the series. I read the whole series twice, so it is that good. This series is really good for people who want to get into fantasy, maybe have either never read fantasy before or just aren't really big readers. So it follows Jude Dewart. I say Dewart, that's just how I say it in my head. It follows Jude, who is a human living in fairyland. She is this cutthroat, badass girl. She is very morally gray. I would say pretty much all of the characters in this series are morally gray, so if morally gray is your thing, this is for you. Her interactions with Cardan, who is a prince of fairy. This trilogy is the story of her and her rise to power. She kicks ass and takes names and kills people, and it's amazing. It's so fun. Maybe that's just me, I don't know. But it is, I am so entertained every time I read this series. Jude and Cardan are just some of the best characters in literature. The first book is called The Cruel Prince, the second is The Wicked King, and this is the third, called The Queen of Nothing. There's also a novella called How the King of Elfame Learned to Hate Stories. It is about Cardan. So much happens in these books. Just read it. Just read it. You'll understand. Another TJR book is The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. So this is about a old Hollywood star named Evelyn Hugo, who is very reclusive and mysterious. It's basically Evelyn Hugo telling the story of her life to this reporter. And you find out why she's doing that finally in the end, and why she chose this specific kind of nobody reporter. She's talked about a lot for a reason. It is really, really good. If you like the golden age of Hollywood glamour aesthetic, definitely check this out. This one is Fixer Up. It is the first in a series of standalones that are all interconnected. It is about Georgette, or Georgie, whose family runs like a home renovation business in the town that she lives in, and she's a birthday party clown for kids. But she wants people to take her more seriously, so she goes to this guy who is her brother's best friend, childhood friend, Travis, who's a retired baseball player, who wants to be taken seriously as well because he's up for a commentating job, and he wants people to think that he's settled down, he's stopped being a player, which is his reputation, and so they fake date. His best friend, it's fake dating. It's kind of Grumpy Sunshine, I would say, if I'm remembering correctly. So cute. A nice quick read. I absolutely love the ending. That is what pushed it from a 4.5 to a 5 for me, was the ending. Check it out. 2 more. Another Taylor Jenkins read, Daisy Jones and the Six. This is one of my favorite books of all time. This is the story of the fictional band Daisy Jones and the Six, their journey. It is told entirely in an interview format, which I absolutely loved because it is so easy to imagine this as like a documentary, like a tell-all documentary, which I think was the idea. You get so invested in the characters because they feel so real. Their voices just feel so real. It's a great intro to historical fiction. It takes place pretty much just in the 1970s. So if you're really into that aesthetic, like there's a 1970s rock and roll band aesthetic, I cannot recommend this one enough. It's insanely good. It is insanely good. Like literally just trust me. Just trust me. Go pick it up. I feel like I end every review in this video with, and yeah, is Stalking Jack the Ripper by Karen Maniscalco. Thomas Cresswell, who is the main love interest, is just the love interest to end all love interests, okay? Basically, this is a historical fiction. It's YA, and it takes place in 1888. This book in particular follows Audrey Rose Wadsworth, who is our main character, as she studies forensic medicine alongside Thomas under her uncle, who is a forensic scientist, and they investigate the Jack the Ripper murders. Now, the cool thing about this one is that in the end, you actually do find out who Jack the Ripper is, even though that didn't actually happen in real life. Well, if I had to pick a book that was just the epitome of my taste, or as close to it as possible, it would probably be this one. If you were into true crime, read it. If you're into mysteries, read it. If you're into historical fiction, if you're into romance, if you're into just feminist icons in Victorian London, read it. Read this book. All of these settings for these books are so eerie and yet magical at the same time. The setting, the characters, the dialogue, it really transports you back to the time that it takes place. Check her out. That is all for this video. I really hope you enjoyed that. Go check out my Bookstagram if you aren't from there already. It is Books and Caffeine. We'll see you guys in the next one.